Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's August 9th, 2018, and we are broadcasting to you today live from our Open Stories Foundation / Mormon Stories studios in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm Dr. John DeLynn, the host of Mormon Stories podcast, and today we are bringing back a regular guest on Mormon Stories podcast. We're bringing back Bishop Sam Young. A dear friend of mine. Sam and my dad were business partners with Barter Systems Incorporated, which was a company back in the 80s in Houston. But Sam Young has gone on to become an activist within Mormonism, progressive Mormonism, specifically first around this sort of notion of common consent and voting opposed and sustaining that sort of thing. He's quickly moved his attention to protecting LDS children and these interviews where children are asked, sexually explicit questions while alone with bishops and stake presidents and bishopric members behind closed doors. And we've covered Sam throughout his initiative, and we're now at maybe the most dramatic phase of his work so far. We've seen him put together a petition that started out with a few thousand signatures. Last I heard, we're up to 55,000 or more. Sam can give us the update on that. We did a series on Mormon Stories podcast on sexually explicit interviews and how they really harmed children and youth and even adults in the church. And then Sam's gone on to create a website, protectlDSchildren.org, I believe it is. He's published a bunch of essays about people's stories about these damaging interviews and how they've hurt them. And then he's gone on to lead a full march in Salt Lake City that we attended, where they marched to church headquarters and delivered books that included these essays and delivered to each apostle and each member of the First Presidency. And now Sam Young has initiated a hunger strike. This is particularly interesting and close to my heart because, I read a biography on Gandhi. Gandhi has been very inspirational to me. And one thing I learned when I was reading his biography is that after India was set for independence, the Muslims and the Hindus within India started killing each other as they were grappling for power in the emergence of India and eventually Pakistan as a country. And so Gandhi went on a hunger strike to demand that his followers stop killing each other. And so when Sam told me in a jacuzzi in Dallas a few weeks ago that he would be doing a hunger strike, I was particularly moved. So we've done our best to support Sam. We're really excited now to be bringing him on, to have him kind of give us an update on his movement, what he's doing, what he's trying to do, how it's working. And we're doing this live because we hope that you will share with us your questions and comments, your experiences, so that we can make the most of this time together. I do have a few very brief announcements. We have several really cool and important and interesting workshops and retreats coming up, and I really want you guys to hear about them. We're doing Idaho Falls this weekend. It's probably too late to sign up for that, but we have 70 people signed up. It's probably the largest workshop we've ever had to date. We're really excited about Idaho Falls. We're actually going to be doing a caravan where 15 of us meet in Salt Lake City, and we're going to drive in a bus, a 15-passenger bus to Idaho Falls, and we're going to karaoke and workshop and do coaching and sharing all the way there and all the way back. We're going to stop in Lava Hot Springs. If you guys ever want to do something like that, we'll plan it. So get your creative juices flowing. What would be really fun would be to do a church history tour with John Hamer, where we drive from like New York to Kirtland to Independence to Nauvoo, have a big bus, charter a big bus, have John Hamer be the tour guide, and we just have fun, karaoke, and learn about church history and do coaching and workshops. If anybody wants to sponsor an event like that, let's do it. As far as other events coming up, I will be in Portland, Oregon, August 17th and 18th. We've got about 40 people registered for that. We've got room for about 20 more. 40 is a great number. But if any of you are struggling in your marriage, in your personal life with your faith crisis, trying to raise kids, trying to pick up the pieces after a faith crisis, concerned about communicating with believing family and friends, mental health. These workshops are very highly rated, 4.9 out of 5 every time, and people are highly satisfied. Please check out the Portland event. A couple other really cool things. September 15th and 16th, we are flying to Sweden. We're flying to Sweden because we're going to interview Hans and Birgitta Mattsson. We have never caught them on video before. We interviewed them, but we never got them on video. Hans Mattsson's coming out with a brand new book he's come out with a new book about his faith crisis, about his journey. It first came out in Swedish. Now it's coming out in English, and we want to honor Hans and Birgitta and the Swedish people. For those of you who remember the Swedish rescue, Swedes were among the first country in critical mass to openly express concerns about the church's dealings with history, its truth claims, its openness, its honesty. And many of you will remember that Marlin Jensen and Turley flew out to Sweden to try and rescue the Swedes from a massive hemorrhaging of Swedes leaving the church over the faith crisis. And Hans Mattson and Birgitta and the Swedish people were a part of that. So we are flying to Sweden September 15th and 16th for a 2-day event to honor the Swedes. We're going to interview Hans and Birgitta. We're going to interview other Swedish saints. And we're basically going to just thank them and celebrate them. We have room for anyone in the United States or anywhere else in the world that wants to fly with us on this trip. And we're going to have a lot of fun. So check out mormonstories.org/events if you want to join us. There's about 25 slots left. We have over 30 people already registered. I believe the cap is around 60, maybe 70. And so there's a few slots left if you want to join us to honor Hans and Birgitta and promote their book. Then we're doing a workshop in Switzerland, September 21st and 22nd. That's not because I wanted to go to Switzerland. I've been to Switzerland. It's because the people in Switzerland requested a workshop. So if you want to come join us in Switzerland, we're also going to travel and have some fun while we're there. You can. We are doing a live podcast interview with Mindy Gledhill. Mindy Gledhill is an amazing musician, Mormon musician. She has come out with a new album about her faith crisis. And we are going to be doing, like we did with Angela Soph, like we did with Sarah Sample, we're going to be having this lovely evening with Mindy Gledhill where we interview her about her faith crisis, but also have her play some of her songs from her new album about her faith crisis. That's going to be October 18th down in her studio in Utah County. We really want you to join us. And of course, we have our Bahamas cruise, October 24th through 28th. I've never been on a cruise. Again, this was requested by Mormon Stories listeners. It'll be work for me, but it'll be fun for you. So please come join us in the Bahamas if you want to. And then finally, and I heard recently that fares are really low on this cruise. So if you sign up now, you can actually get a good rate to join us on a fun cruise. And then finally, we're coming to Sacramento November 2nd through 3rd for another workshop. And we really want you to attend. So mormonstories.org/events if you want to attend any of these events. And then we're putting together our event calendar for 2019. There's some things we'd love to do. An EFY for progressive and post-Mormon youth. We'd love to do a singles retreat for single people. We would love to come to more cool places. So if you want to host a workshop or retreat, all we need is 20 people to sign up and to give us an indication that they would join us, and then some dates and a venue, and we will book it and make it happen. So please let us know if you're interested. So that's enough with the announcements. We hope many of you are joining us today live. And Sam Young, we want to welcome you back to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Well, thank you. And the first thing I want to do is thank you, John, for the amazing support you have been since the beginning of this Protect LDS Children movement.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's a real honor. I have admitted this before, but when you started with the petition, I told you very directly, I haven't seen petitions really amount to much. I was always a believer in your cause, but I wasn't sure if a petition would have legs. And you made the petition matter by connecting with the media. And then from there, this whole movement's exploded. And it's as important of an event, as far as I'm concerned, as Ordained Women was. as, the CES letter, Jeremy Runnels, as so many of the progressive Mormon activist movements we've seen. I've never seen a Mormon activist initiative that actually elicited explicit direct change and response from the church, and in such a short time. Not only is the church almost never willing to make immediate changes, but certainly not in association directly with an event. And you've achieved that. So it's been an honor to be a small part of that.
So you say that I've achieved that. Excuse me, my voice has started to get weaker. But it's not just I, it's we. So John, you were a part of making that happen. Tens of thousands of people have been part of making that happen. All the survivors and victims that have come forward and shared their stories, the testimonials of the great damages that we are causing our children. All these people, it's not me anymore. It may have been me on Halloween night, but after that, it's been a bunch of people.
Well, yeah, and you've put a great team together, and I've been really impressed with your team and all the volunteers. So shout out to all the people that have made the Protect LDS Children movement a success. So Sam, you look a little bit thinner than when we met last, and that's just a playful way and a bit of a somber way to kind of begin this interview. So can we back up for people who haven't been following you? Talk about, last time we kind of checked in with you was right before we did the march. Can you take us back to the how the march was, what came out of it, and then what led to you deciding to do the hunger strike? So just catch us up. So
you've gone through the chronology of the things we've done. We don't need to do that again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the march. The march was so amazing. I asked my wife after it was done what she thought about it, and I loved her words. She said, Sam, it was magical. And it really was a tremendous event. There's many things that it accomplished, but the big one was it caused the church to make an announcement prior to our march. Now, I think they were looking at taking the wind out of our sails, but the changes were good. We appreciated those changes, but they certainly, they might have eliminated 1% of the one-on-one interviews. And so it was a good change, but it really didn't have the strength behind it that we need to truly protect our children. So
what were some of the emotional highlights of that event for you? Give us kind of a mental imagery of some of the most emotional moments for you during that march. I can think of a couple, but I'd love to hear you share.
The absolute most emotional parts of it were meeting people whose stories are in the book, and putting a face with the name and the story that I had read perhaps months before and cried in the middle of the night as I read what had happened to them. So those are the most poignant moments for me. A woman at the end of the march whose story, a tragic story, and hopefully she's doing very well today. But she came over and gave me a hug and then just started sobbing so hard that her body was vibrating, or whatever the proper term is. I mean, she was just shaking as she sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. The validation of her story being delivered to the apostles.
Yeah. And I remember just how emotional it was to see how many people showed up, to see families showing up, to see faithful members showing up, how many people showed up, and just to have you deliver each book that you prepared specifically for each apostle or member of the First Presidency, have a different victim present the book to the church media who did show up to receive the books, and what it was like just to stand in front of church headquarters and try to get the brethren to listen.
Yeah. And that was a special moment, having our ambassadors one by one present those books. It was kind of an exciting crush of people right there. So I've never done this before. The people on my team have never done this before. So some things weren't well organized, and maybe that was good not to be well organized right there, because there was just this feeling of this mass of people crushing in to be a part of having this historic moment of having this book of sacred stories delivered to the apostles.
Totally. So what happened after that, and what led to you deciding to do a hunger strike? Was there any positive, church response that came out of the March for the Children, or did they just ignore it? Or do you know?
Well, first of all, they did not ignore it, because we had the change that was issued 4 days before the march happened. In June, they issued another change, which was a reasonable change. Again, it did not prevent sexual explicit questions, nor did it eliminate the one-on-one interviews, but it was a good change, happened in June. Now, so for March, April, May, April and May, John, I'm not retired. My income still has to do with my business, and so I need to get back to my business. I was able to do that for a couple of months. We plan another event on National Children's Day, where we ask people to wear buttons to church, and I underestimated how difficult that is for people to wear a button to church. Even that is kind of a scary thing in our culture that is so saturated with fear. You don't see that. Most members do not see that culture of fear, but once you start being concerned about things might be wrong in the church, oh boy, you realize that once you start talking about it in church, you get so much pushback. It affects your families, it affects your friends, and it can affect your job. So a lot of folks, anyway, we did the button day. A whole bunch of people supported that, but not as many as I would have expected, because of people can't say anything, speak out in any way at church.
And when we talk about, this is just sort of, I like to do my little timeout minutes. For those of you who haven't checked out my interview with Stephen Hassan, the book, Combating Cult Mind Control, he talks about the BITE model, BITE. Unhealthy organizations control behavior, control information, control thoughts, and control emotions. And the fact that people are scared to wear a button that calls on the church to protect children should speak volumes about how controlled people are in an LDS context. Not to paint the church in a negative light, not to say it's evil or bad, just to say that unhealthy organizations have that tight of a control. And if people are scared to wear a button, that for those paying attention, that should speak volumes about how controlling the church is over the lives of its members in possibly an unhealthy way. Not to kick the church, but just to sort of face reality.
Yeah. And I would hope that would change in our church, that we could explore realities and truths and things that are going on today that affect our children, that affect our friends, that affect our church. So anyway, we did that in June, and I had this, I basically put everything on the line in my life. And there was one thing left that I could still put on the line, and that was my health. And we have examples. You mentioned Gandhi. He accomplished great things with his hunger strike. And as you know, I had this on my mind, but my wife had told me that that was not something that she was comfortable with. And so I had backed off on that. But once I realized in June, we're not getting anywhere. We've had some nice changes. Those changes were good, but they were basically a great PR thing to put the church back to sleep Okay, there's problems. No, we've addressed it, and we all go back to sleep.
So we covered this in our last interview, but for those who didn't, I will let me restate what I remember the changes to be, and then I want to hear you say again why they're not sufficient. So it seems like what the church did to respond was to publish a list of some suggested questions that can be asked to youth, to make it official in its policy that children and youth have the option of bringing in somebody if they so choose, and that an adult must be in an adjacent room for all interviews with children and youth where they're alone with a leader. Am I missing any of the changes that the church made in direct response to your collective movement?
The last thing you mentioned there must be a parent or an adult, another adult in an adjacent room, in the hallway, or in the foyer, is what it said. That was not a change. That was already in existence.
Okay.
The changes were the first one they made before the march, a 16-word change, that if a child desires, the leader may allow another adult to be in the room. That's a positive change in that it becomes difficult for the bishop. If a parent comes in and says, I want to be in that room, it's difficult for the bishop to say no. I now know many places where the bishops are announcing generally to the children, if you want to have somebody in the room, you can. Now, here's the problem with it, though. Number one, we're concerned about protecting our children. We are putting the decision in how to protect the child in the child's hands, not the adults, not the parents. This is the children do not understand the problems that interview can cause. Many adults don't understand. I didn't even know what grooming was until this last year. The term grooming meant something else.
Cutting the hair of a dog
Yes.
and clipping the toenails of a dog.
Yes.
Right?
So that's grooming. But in fact, it's kind of funny. I didn't realize what grooming fully was until I was at my first press conference. And I'd asked Joelle Castiex with SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. I had asked her to speak because they're familiar with this. They were very instrumental in the Catholic abuse scandal coming to light. And she wrote when she heard about this, she wrote an article, made the statement that we are the only church or youth-serving organization in the country that allows one-on-one interviews and talk about sex. Well, at the press conference, as she was talking, she said, this is grooming behavior when the bishop's taking a child behind closed doors and asking sexual questions. She said that was grooming behavior. So if I don't know what it is until I'm 65 years old, a kid at 12 years old has no idea what normalizing means. Normalizing them to being alone with an older man that is respected in the community and being asked about sex. That is not normalized in the world, but we normalize our children. So we want to protect them from that. But we've not put that in the adult's hands. We put that in the child's hands. So here's the way it functionally works. A month or so ago, somebody came up to me in my ward, in the other ward in the building, and he said, Sam, I just want to tell you what happened. I'm in the youth program. We have a temple trip coming up. And the bishop came in with all the youth there and announced that we're going to be conducting the Temple Recommend interviews today. And if you'd like, you can have your parent come into the room with you. Who would like to have your parent in the room? Now think of a group, 12 to 17. What is the peer pressure factor? Well, of course, not a single hand was raised. So the kids streamed one by one in and out of that bishop's office. I don't think the parents had any idea that the interviews were happening. Of course, there was another adult in the hallway or in the room next door. Church is going on, but we've got super peer pressure not to say, yes, I'd like to have somebody else in the room. or they have other pressure of not wanting to offend the bishop to invite them in. They do not see the danger. They don't understand all the dangers of shaming. I didn't know that until this last year either. There's horrendous dangers when you start shaming a kid in the bishop's office. Bishops will say, we don't shame the kids. Once you say, do you masturbate? You have shamed the child, especially if they are masturbating. Anyway, so that's the change, that a child, if the child desires, the bishop may allow another person in that room, but it eliminates maybe 1% of the one-on-one interviews. The default is the one-on-one. So that's the one change. The second one came in June, and they listed they published a list of questions, which are basically the temple recommend interview questions, with a couple of them eliminated. And then they said that on the first interview, the bishop should notify the child and their parents of what the interview policy is, which is good. No, that's really good. But those questions, it eliminates no sexually explicit questions. It says these are the questions that should be asked, and bishops, in order to further discuss the law of chastity, you can go to Further Strength of Youth pamphlet. And that opens you up to everything. And perhaps the absolute worst thing that it opens up to you, when it talks about chastity in this pamphlet for kids, the first, right off the bat, sexual sin is so serious that it's next to murder. That is a horrible thing to be teaching our children. It does all kinds of damage. So many testimonials of the problems. Anyway, those are the two. You're right. Those are the two things that came out. So positive, but they really don't do much.
Okay. And I'll just incorporate a few listener comments here. Ruskov writes, don't put the burden on the child to ask someone else to come into the room. Yeah, the kid's 8, the kid's 9, the kid's 12, 11. The goal is to have them not get sexually abused, to not be groomed, to think that it's okay for an adult male to ask them sexually explicit questions alone in a room. Why would we ask a child? Would we give the child the option of playing with gasoline or not? I mean, there are things that you just don't put on the shoulders of a child to make them decide.
So it's interesting. For my girls to go to girls' camp, they have to have my signature to go to girls' camp. To go into an interview where there are all kinds of dangers, they don't need any. The bishop doesn't even need to contact me.
Yeah. Somebody else writes, Gary writes, I would have never wanted my parents in on one of those interviews, because who wants to admit that they're masturbating in front of their parent? So it's kind of a catch-22, because they're saying that the child or youth has the option, but what child or youth is going to want to answer those questions in front of a parent?
So Gary has a good point. He has been normalized to a behavior that every other religion looks at with repugnance. We've been normalized to that. Once we're normalized to, you always have two people in that interview and you do not talk about sex, hey, we're going to be okay. That's going to be a natural and normal thing, as it is in every other religion.
Our colleague Cody Layton writes, Bishop's interviews always made me blush, and not in a good way. Thanks for sharing, Cody. It's good to have you tuning in. I found it profound when someone on Reddit made the point that the church requires 2 adult men to be present whenever the tithing money is counted each week, but they don't require 2 adults to be present whenever a child is being asked sexually explicit questions. And you know, what that suggests, and I'm not saying this is true, but what it gives people the impression of is that the church cares more about keeping its money than it does protecting its children. Is that fair? Is that not fair?
Of course that's fair. And let's say that you had just one person counting the tithing and they stole the tithing. So they steal the tithing. Who does that hurt? It doesn't hurt the kids. It doesn't hurt the congregation. It hurts the church. They lose some money. But let's take that kid that's one-on-one with the bishop. There are stories in the book that are so egregious where sexual abuse, the child was abused right there in the bishop's office. That
By the bishop.
By the bishop.
Bishops have sexually abused children in the bishop's office.
In the bishop's office.
Yeah.
You go to the website, go to see the stories, and you'll find right off the bat 2 stories where the child, and they made the comment, I wish my parents had been in that room. This never would have happened to them, where they have a lifetime of trying to recover from that sexual abuse. And all the decisions that they made, now feeling as a worthless human being, you make bad decisions. That was all precipitated by what happened in that bishop's office. So by doing it one-on-one, what is stolen, the church doesn't lose any money, except they might lose a member. But what is stolen cannot be easily recovered. The self-worth of that child, the self-loathing, the suicide ideation, the suicide attempts. The kids that have committed suicide, that have died by suicide over this, that can't be recovered. If we had 2 people in that room, if we had an advocate for that child in the room, we can eliminate this stuff. Who cares? I don't give a damn if anybody steals any money out of that clerk's office. They can fix that. But I give a great big damn about the kids who are harmed in that bishop's office. Protect our kids more than we protect our money. That's where we need to be. Sorry about that, John. I know I'm supposed to be meek and mild.
I love it. Sean writes, I had a talk with my friend at work about Protect LDS Children. He was shocked to hear about one-on-one interviews between adults and children. And when he watched the video with the 29 questions, which we'll cover later, he was horrified. He is Baptist. I got a good insight from him into what other churches do. They don't allow any of this. Want to comment on that?
First of all, Sean, you are listening. Sean, thank you so much. You are doing exactly what we need. So our event right now, or our action right now, is Hunger Strike and Spotlight. The Spotlight is the most important. So my Hunger Strike helps you put a spotlight on things, helps give you the courage to talk to people. Talk to everybody that's not a member of the church. They need to know exactly what is happening in our church to our children. So thank you, Sean.
So you delivered those books to all the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency. Tell us what you heard about, to the extent to which, did any of them write you? Did any of them respond? Did you get any feedback, or what have you heard through the grapevine?
Well, so first of all, we didn't know if they were going to ever be delivered to the apostles. Within a week, Public Affairs told me that they had been delivered to the office of the apostles, the apostles and First Presidency. But they could not verify whether or not they had actually reached their desks. Sometime between April and June, I received a communication. It was in my state conference in March. April, May. In May, we had a state conference, and Elder Christofferson came.
D. Todd
Christofferson. Hallelujah. What an appropriate guy to come to our state conference. I thought that was pretty cool. So I attended state conference. I was sitting a couple rows back, directly in front of where Elder Christofferson was going to be seating. The chapel is now pretty much full with people coming early. And then 2 security guards came up to where I was sitting. I was a little nervous. Security guards, are they coming here to throw me out of the building? I didn't know what they were coming to talk to me about, but the reason they wanted to talk to me was to make sure I wasn't going to be disruptive as we did the sustainings. Well, of course I wasn't going to be disruptive. That's just not my nature, I don't think, except on the sidewalks of Salt Lake City. I'm not disruptive. So once I told them I was just going to vote like everybody else, except on a little different way, they then said, Elder Christofferson wants us to tell you that the books are on his desk. And they then said, and we can confirm that, we've seen the books on his desk. My heart shot up. Yes, we did this. We've done all this work, and they've managed to land on the desk of at least one apostle. About a month later, the stake president wanted to meet with me. We sat down and had a wonderful, just delightful meeting with he and the bishop. And he told me that Elder Christofferson, during that stake conference, so this is now a month after the stake conference, wanted me to know more information. He said that Elder Christofferson had read all 3 books. Now, all 3 books, we delivered 1 book of the sacred stories. We delivered 2 books of the petitions, which the petitions had another couple thousand stories in them. So if he read all 3 books, he's read thousands of stories of issues with our children. So he said he'd read all the stories, read all 3 books, dynamite. He said that some of those stories can be interpreted differently. Well, okay, I can get that. Number 3, some of them are tragic. Hallelujah. He recognizes the tragedy that we have caused in so many of our children's lives. He said we can learn from those stories. Hallelujah. How cool is that? The apostle said we can learn from what so many victims, so many survivors have been vulnerable enough to share out in the open. We can learn from them, and change is coming. So I really like that. Now, I think the change, we know that one change that was coming happened in June when they issued those questions and said you need to talk to the parents about what our policy is. So that was great, too.
Okay. We got lots of comments coming in. Want to thank our listeners for posting comments and questions. Our own dear friend Ryan McKnight, who runs Mormon Leaks, writes, all of my worthiness interviews as a minor occurred in South Central America and in Spanish. I did not know enough Spanish to know exactly what I was being asked, so I have no idea what questions I got. My first worthiness interview in English occurred right before receiving the Melchizedek priesthood, and the bishop was my dad's cousin. He specifically asked me if I masturbated, and it was very unexpected and embarrassing. Thank you for sharing that, Ryan. We're sorry for that bad experience.
Can I respond to that, John?
Please.
So perhaps what we ought to be doing is conducting all of our interviews in Spanish. That might fix our problem.
Love it. Angelina writes, yeah, right. I think she's being a little skeptical that the brethren actually read the books, all the way through, which we don't know. We'd be speculating.
I'm taking them at their word.
Yeah. Jonathan Streeter, who's been supportive of you, as I understand, quite a bit throughout this journey, he wrote, they probably lose more money to settlements over abuse than they would from tithing embezzlement. So I think it's fair to say that there might even be, not that they should be primarily financially motivated to protect LDS children, but, Streeter's making the argument that there's probably a good financial sense for them to protect themselves. I'm sure the Boy Scouts, when they did the too deep policy, it was to protect themselves from lawsuits more than anything else. Any response to Jonathan?
So Jonathan, that is a super good observation, one that I'd never thought of. But yes, they ought to be very concerned. That I agree.
Okay, we're going to include a lot more questions as we go. A lot of people are asking about the hunger strike. So let's talk about that. So it sounds like you did the buttons. You got the feedback about the march. You got back to work a little bit to try and keep your business going. But at some point, was this sort of like set this up for us? Was this like a Hail Mary in your mind? Were you just desperate? Were you just really exacerbated? A lot of people would say a hunger strike is a really extreme thing. Some would even say it's kind of crazy. So get personal and vulnerable for a second and talk about why this, somebody actually wrote, and this is a vulnerable on the part of a listener. She writes, my husband, let's see, I want to find that really quick. Sorry for just a second. I'm not finding it. Maybe Tim can pin it. But talk about the personal choice around a hunger strike and how you and your wife came to the conclusion that that was an okay next step.
John.
Oh, Amy wrote, why the hunger strike in particular? My husband committed suicide by refusing his feeding tube and starving to death. Isn't there another way to get your message across that may be better? So don't answer her question. Use that as a setup to explain your approach, your strategy.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm not going to die from this hunger strike. I am putting my health at risk. It could affect my organs. Okay, we'll get into that here later. But why did I decide to do this? You realize that I have thousands of adults who have been vulnerable enough to share their stories personally with me. That means thousands of children who are harmed egregiously by our interview policy. So I know the horrid dangers of what we're doing. I know that more stories are being written every single day. So I have a motivating force behind me that perhaps nobody else can relate to. Maybe some therapists could relate to that, but to read night after night for hours upon hours, and then converse for hours with many of these victims to see the pain that they're still in decades later. I happen to believe deep in my heart in the teachings and example of Jesus Christ. They're not just something that I flippantly talk about or listen to. They're in my heart and soul, and they've always been. I've always had this where I want to be compassionate to those that are on the margins, always. You know, I may have 20 years left to live. I don't know how much longer. But I certainly don't want to sit on the sidelines with people that I now represent, that I'm a part of their healing process. And more people, I know I'll be part, not just me, but our movement will be part of their healing process. So I looked around at what else do I have to sacrifice? I've already put everything on the line, everything. My marriage, my relationship with my family, my friendships, my membership in the church, my business, my finances. What the hell else do I have that at the end of my life I can say, Jesus Christ's teachings and example was a central part of my life. Well, it's my health. It's me. I can put that on the line. I can take 3 or 4 weeks out of my life. And that'll pass. I mean, for heaven's sakes, 13 days have already passed. So somebody said it was a Hail Mary. Well, maybe. All I know is I was looking around for what else I could do that would put a spotlight on this. So that's kind of what led to the decision to go forward with it.
How was Patty when you told her you wanted to do this? What was her reaction?
I made the decision the end of June to do this.
We talked, you mentioned it in my interview with you.
Yeah.
Right before or right after the march.
Yeah, so I mentioned it. She was not okay with it at that point. So I decided not to do it. But we had a few months to mend that relationship, for her to see that I jumped back in with the family and our relationship in the business. And she's concerned about our business too. But I did not had not felt comfortable yet. I didn't feel like I had a way to talk to her about it yet once I made the decision at the end of June. So I did my research on it, talked to nutritionists, talked to doctors, did the internet research, and started my preparation in July 1st. And the preparation is you start altering your diet to work your body to where when you go on the fast, it's not as hard as it is if you just do it cold turkey. So I'm 2 weeks in to this. We're all just calling it a diet, which it was a diet. And so everybody's getting on the diet, but I haven't revealed the reason that I was doing this. And then one Sunday, my wife said, Sam, you are doing God's work. Frankly, I don't know if I'm doing God's work. I'm following my heart that is dictated by the teachings that I fully embrace. But she said, Sam, I believe you're doing God's work in standing up, protect our children. And I'm thinking in my head, hallelujah, I think that's going to be the door to open to talk to her about this. And so the next day I thought about it, how I could do it. And the next day I used her observation that I'm doing the work of God, that I wanted to further that work of God by doing one more thing, putting one more thing on the line. And then we talked about it, and she was, I think, a little surprised, but she was supportive and said, yeah, that sounds good. Now, over the next 2 weeks, I had a while to get used to this, but springing it on my wife, she was okay with it, and then not okay with it, and then really upset, and then super supportive. And then, so for the next 2 weeks, we went back and forth figuring out what to do. And finally, by the end of the week, at the end of the 2 weeks, she was fine. Concerned about my health, but fine with me doing this.
And so the diet was to sort of gradually reduce certain foods week by week.
Yeah.
Until when you started the fast. Talk quickly about that.
So the first week, and I published this,
yeah.
And so I don't quite remember everything I gave up the first week. So the first week, it was sugar, soda, bread. I can't remember when I gave the bread and pasta up. Second week, no more meat, no more beef. I could have chicken and fish. And so I think it was bread and pasta the second week. Now, going into third and fourth weeks, it was only fruit and vegetables. And the second week of that fruit and vegetables, it was lowering the quantities of food. I didn't do very good on that. I kept eating the same amount of avocado and everything else it was kind of cool that after 2 weeks, you get used to that diet. So that's what it basically was.
Okay. And the doctor told you had about how long before, this would start to really jeopardize your health?
Well, frankly, the doctors I talked to didn't have any experience with a long fast. So I only could find one person that had done an 8-day fast. And he said that you were going to have a bad headache the first 2 days, and you're going to be lethargic. And then you get a burst of energy for the next 3 to 8 days. And I'm thinking, I can't imagine having a burst of energy not going with food. Well, what happened, I had no headache, I had no huge hunger pangs, and I didn't have a lack of energy. And I think that was because of the preparation going into it. Now, what happens from day 9 on? I'm into uncharted territory as far as people that I personally know that have done this. And
so you have not eaten food since how many days ago?
This is day 13.
What's that like? Like I have a hard time fasting for one meal. 2 is excruciating. What's it like to go not just a full day, but more than 10 days without eating food? What's that like? Is it hard? Is it driving you crazy? Do you want to cheat? Is it stressful?
So, John, and I mentioned this on a live feed that we did the other day at Temple Square, was that somebody said, Sam, you need to look like you're suffering from this. You need to look like you've gone a long time without a fast. Well, I don't know exactly how to do that. because if anybody watching this program right now that had not seen me 27 pounds earlier would be thinking, well, that guy, how can he possibly be on a fast? But I've always been transparent and open about this stuff. I have been on the fast for 13 days, but it hasn't been super hard to date. Now, the first few days, I was a little bit faint. In fact, I had one day at Temple Square where I had to put my hands on two people on either side just to try to stay conscious. That's the only time that has happened, but I have had moments of being a little bit faint. My energy level has been pretty consistent until yesterday. Yesterday, I started to feel a little bit of not being quite as full of energy. So that's at day 12 I started feeling that. I don't know. I mean, hey, look, when I start talking to somebody like this, I forget all that stuff. So I will be able to evaluate later on today, where is my energy level? So I'm expecting that to start declining. Now, I was given some advice that you need to continue to be active, not super active, but you need to do some walking. It'd be good if you did some resistance training, but do not do excessive stuff. I've heard other people say, no, you need to consume or conserve your energy. Rest as much as you can. Well, I'm not doing much resting. I don't know which is the proper way to pursue it, but it's hard to rest because I've got so much stuff going on. So my guess is I will start to see my energy deteriorate.
And you say you've lost how many pounds?
27 pounds.
27 pounds so
now,
far.
That's since July 1st. I lost 14 pounds in preparing for the fast or for this hunger strike. I've lost 13 pounds in 13 days.
Pound a day.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's fast. And you are consuming some vitamins, minerals, and electrolytes, right?
So I take my vitamins. I take an eyedropper full of minerals. So there's no nutrition in that. I make a homemade electrolyte, which is composed of. Now you're going to love this. I mean, it's so tasty. Man, it's so tasty. A teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of substitute salt, which is basic potassium chloride, a teaspoon of baking soda, oh yum, and a tablespoon of honey. Hallelujah. So there's my nutrition every day, is 1 tablespoon of honey to make the electrolyte not so disgusting. But apparently you need a little sugar, and that comes from the honey. So that's my electrolyte that I consume every day.
Okay. Let's talk about the content, the programming of your hunger strike. Tell us what you've called it, and then tell us what you've been doing each night on Temple Square. And let's talk about the invitation to the apostles and First Presidency, how that's gone. And then let's talk about what else you've done to bring publicity to this hunger strike.
And remind me, the church did make a response to the hunger strike the day I announced it.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So first of all, what this is called, this action is called Hunger Strike and Spotlight. I and several others are doing the hunger strike. There are 2 that are now that are either the same day or one day behind me in the hunger strike. And they hope to be able to do it the entire length of time. I've had other people that have done it for 7 days, 8 days. So anyway, hunger strike and spotlight. I'm doing the hunger strike with some friends. The spotlight part of it, we're asking everybody that is on board with this cause, that want to see a change made, to put a spotlight on this. A spotlight on social media, what's going on, the concerns, the problems, the change they'd like to see in the church. The sharing our videos, sharing whatever information they can in every social media channel they can. And then to talk to members of the church. Talk to non-members about this. We want to spread the awareness every place. Now, it's not safe for everybody to share.
Well, we're going to talk about that at the end, what people can do.
Okay, great.
So talk about what you're doing with the move right now on Temple Square.
Okay, so every night we hold what we're calling a temple-side chat with an apostle. So we've invited the apostles each night. They have the schedule of each night to come and hear personally the damage, hear from real people on the harms that they suffered, to answer questions, to hear comments from directly from members of the church that are concerned about this. We do that at 7 o'clock. It lasts for an hour. So far, we haven't had an apostle come. We're hoping that we'll see the president of the Quorum of the 12, Elder Ballard, show up tonight. So we have only 4 more nights of this. Actually, Sunday, we're not going to do it tonight. We're moving it to noon. And that has just been a choice experience.
So let's talk about that. So there are kind of 3 parts of me. One part of me says, that's a publicity stunt. You're basically trying to shame them into appearing. They can't appear. They're too busy. You're just one member. They've already responded to you. It's just a publicity stunt. So, part of me says that. Part of me says, man, wouldn't that be cool if they showed up, right? Wouldn't it be cool if they showed that they really do listen and they really do care and they really engaged? But then part of me just says, they can't. They need to look like they're getting their direction from the Lord, not from some Yahoo who's protesting in what they would say a disrespectful way on Temple Square. So talk about that first point first, which is some would say that's just kind of a shaming gimmick that really isn't sincere and isn't very productive. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, it's super productive. This has helped. Tens of thousands of people have seen this. 150,000 views at this point around the world. So it's been super productive. It has helped in healing. It's helped motivate people to share this all over the place, put a spotlight on it. So for the cause of healing and saving our children, it has already done great things. Now, what was the other question?
But you could do that without inviting the apostle. You could do temple-side chats and not, it's like day 3, Renland's face, or day 11, Holland's face.
So why
and then
would
you're posting memes on Facebook with like an X that says no show. So, I think it's cool what you're doing, but I'm just trying to represent some people, what questions they might ask.
Please represent.
Yeah.
Questions that won't be asked.
What if somebody says that's just shaming and unproductive because they're not going to come, so it's just a gimmick?
So I would say, why do you have such a low respect of the apostles that you'd say that's shame that because they're not going to come? How do you know they're not going to come? I don't know if they're going to come. I want to give them the opportunity rather than close them out. I could completely close them out. This was an opportunity to include them. When we did the march, I wanted to include them. We invited them to greet us at the end of the march. Well, they chose not to do that. Why would I have not invited them? I respect the apostles. These are men that they're at the head of a worldwide church, okay? They're at the head of the church that I'm a member of. Why would I not include them in this thing? I don't know they're not going to come. I hope they're going to come. I expect them to come. I expect President Nelson to show up on Sunday. Now, people have said that, well, geez, they had vacations. They've got things already committed for this
One
thing.
apostle was throwing out the baseball at a Major League Baseball game.
Yes.
During one of your events.
Damn it. I've got all that crap on my plate too. I've got a business to run. I've got a family to take care of. I've got all this on my plate. I am willing to give it up for the emergency of our children being harmed every week behind closed doors. We had this Thai soccer team that was stranded in a cave. When that became known, did the world sit on their hands and say, oh, that looks like a problem. Yeah, that looks like a problem. Okay, I'm going to go back to eating my lunch. The world rallied around. Resources, ideas, personnel, experts were focused on figuring out how we could save 11 Thai boys and their coach. We don't have just 11 boys that are in harm's way. We have thousands of boys and girls around the world. This, to me, this is an urgent. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Because this is urgent. Wouldn't I expect the same from the apostles? To look and say, we've now got thousands of testimonials in our hands. We've read them. This should be an emergency that we address right now. We have a member of our church that is so committed to saving our own children that he's going on a hunger strike, and there will be tens of thousands of people watching, waiting for an apostle to come. Thank you for inviting us. This is an emergency. I don't understand why I don't care that everybody doesn't view it as an emergency. I sat on my hands and didn't do anything with the Thai thing because I really couldn't do much. I'm glad my government did something. But I can do something with this. So I am rushing to, and I've been rushing for months, I'm rushing again to help heal the wounded, help heal the wounded and save our children.